And also staying with government matters is that government internships this day will be filled courtesy of interviews that will be conducted countrywide for these positions in government ministries, departments and agencies to be filled, and this will continue for the next 1 week. Public Service Commission Chairperson Stephen Njoroge will launch the exercise at Rift Valley Institute of Science and Technology in Nakuru today, and the commission has dispatched several teams led by commissioners to various centers across the country to interview over 8,000 shortlisted candidates who applied for the positions advertised in July this year.
And the latest with the Punguza Mizigo Bill, the Third Way Alliance Party leader Ekuru Okot will this morning make a presentation on the Punguza Mizigo referendum bill to the County Assembly of Turkana. The bill, which is yet to be debated by any of the 47 county assemblies, requires the support of at least 24 counties for it to sail through to the next stage.
And of course, courtesy of the update that we got from Team Simwa today is that Uasin Gishu now becomes the first county to actually adopt this particular piece of legislation that is supposed to inform a referendum. If at all there will be one. But also moving on is that leadership and innovation, or better yet, a leadership and innovation center will today be inaugurated by Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha, who will this afternoon preside over the launch of the new state-of-the-art Britam Leadership and Innovation Center. The facility is located at Britam Center in Upper Hill, Nairobi, which is touted as the tallest building in Kenya.
And moving on to the corridors of justice now, where Joe Mwangi, the ex-manager to child star Wendy Waini, of course, he's set to be arraigned this morning. Now, Mwangi, who was arrested on Monday, is to be charged in connection with forgery and issuing threats to Wendy's mother, Magdalene Mbele. And
still in the courts, a number of suspects will be arraigned at the Kiambu Law Courts in connection with the disappearance of Dutch tycoon, that is Top Cohen, who has been missing since July. Yesterday, the magistrate detained Cohen's wife, Sarah Wairimu Kamotho, for 12 more days pending investigations into his disappearance.
Elsewhere, hearing in the public divorce case pitting Marianne Kitani against Meru Senator Mithika Linturi enters day 5 today. Now, yesterday, Linturi's lawyers began cross-examining Kitani on the testimony she gave before the same court as she sought to prove that indeed she was married to the senator. So, of course, those are the stories that will be creating conversations, will be the top stories of the day, and will definitely be the ones that you'll be seeing right here on K24 TV, especially on K24 Daily Brief, all through as we continue with what's happening in local news, Samuel.
That's very true. We continue with that, where Inspector General of Police Hilary Mutyambai has, with immediate effect, stopped the use of police officers to accompany officials of the Music Copyright Society in their operations. In a circular to the Deputy Inspector General in charge of regular police and administration police, as well as the DCI, Mutyambai notes that the officers have been misused to extort money from the public. The Inspector General says the practice has tainted the image of the National Police Service and ordered an immediate stop to it.
All right, elsewhere, there's a harsh sentence for rapist man jailed for life for defiling an 8-year-old girl 5 years ago, and he got a reprieve after the High Court in Kakamega reduced the sentence to 30 years after an appeal. Now, in his ruling, High Court Judge David Majanja said he had considered the sentence handed to Richard Chogo and found it too harsh. The accused had been convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment after being found guilty of defiling the girl in Lusengeli village in Vihiga County on the 8th of June in 2014.
And of course, we need to move now to the international front. And earlier on, as we began the show, Shiksha actually took us through a hashtag xenophobia attacks. And we've seen what people have had to say in as far as this issue is concerned. And we definitely have an update for you in as far as the international international front is concerned, we will be running that particular update for you right about now. And of course, it will be interesting to see how the government of South Africa treats this particular matter, especially owing to the fact that it's not only happening for the first time, it has been happening over and over again. So what quality of leadership will be provided when it comes to this particular story, where more than 60 people have been arrested in Johannesburg, South Africa, after rioters looted shops and torched buildings and vehicles. Police fired tear gas, rubber bullets and stun grenades in an attempt to quell the unrest on Monday. Now, many of the targeted shops are reported to be owned by foreign nationals, but the country's police said criminality rather than xenophobia was to blame for the senseless violence. However, Nigerian's foreign ministry said Nigerian shops had been targeted by the mindless criminals and promised to take definitive measures. In March, 3 people died during protests that targeted foreign-owned shops in Durban. And of course, that is a story that we shall keep, briefing you on as soon as we get details to it.
All right, and of course, moving away from what's happening in South Africa to Hurricane Durian, where at least 5 people have been killed in the Bahamas as Hurricane Durian continues to batter the country. Now, Prime Minister Hubert Minnis said the deaths were confirmed at the northeastern Abaco Islands, which bore the brunt of the storm, and some 13,000 houses are feared damaged or destroyed. And according to the International Red Cross, Minnis has also said Durian, the second strongest Atlantic hurricane on record, remains extremely dangerous. Pictures showed surging floodwaters, upturned cars and snapped trees. Eyewitness videos and reports paint a picture of massive and widespread flooding, with panicked families fleeing to their roofs to escape the rising waters.
And of course, staying with the international front is that 4 bodies have been recovered and 4 more spotted on the ocean floor after a boat was destroyed by fire off the coast of California. U.S. authorities have now established 5 crew of the commercial diving boat Conception escaped the blaze, and the fire started in the early hours of Monday, where the boat was anchored just meters off Santa Cruz Island, about 90 miles west of Los Angeles. The vessel is now submerged as a search and rescue operation continues. The cause of the blaze is so far unknown.
And a while back, remember, we mentioned that the Pope was stuck in the lift, and it seems like the Pope is making headlines again, where he is going to be touring, and of course he's flying out on Wednesday for a week-long tour, visiting 3 Indian Ocean African countries hard hit by poverty, conflict and natural disaster. The Pope will visit Mozambique, Madagascar and Mauritius, countries visited by Pope John Paul II in 1988 and 1999. Now, Mozambique is first on his tour, and the Pope recorded a video message in Portuguese for the people there ahead of his tour, mentioning John Paul's visit. But the man known as the Pope of the Poor will only have time to visit the capital cities of the 3 countries. And of course, that is what is making headlines when it comes to the international front. Of course, Samuel, we've seen when it comes to the climate change, there's a lot happening at the moment. We've seen California boat fire. We've also seen Hurricane Durian that has affected and has caused tragic destruction amongst people. And of course, it has really caused a lot of chaos in the Bahamas. Absolutely. And as far as the Pope's visit is concerned, of course, definitely we will see the Pope tour Africa, I believe, for the 2nd or 3rd time now. Remember, he was in Kenya in 2015. It was a massive event. We saw actually right here at the University of Nairobi, where he conducted mass, and so many of the issues that have been highlighted in this particular story have come to the forefront yet again. We saw John Paul II visit these particular nations, still on the same note. So definitely a time and an issue that we shall be observing right about now. And talking about climate change, we had our own feature done by Dan Kaburu, and of course he highlighted some of the issues that are happening, especially with the eastern side of Mount Kenya,
where we've seen now Meru, Tharaka Nithi regions that have never reported of drought or going for several seasons without rain is actually what is happening currently. And this next story will help you understand why this has been the turn of events. Shiksha, you can take it.
All right. Now, thousands of residents of Tharaka Nithi and Meru counties are facing acute shortage of water following the drying up of major rivers in the Mount Kenya East region. Now, the situation is expected to worsen as the dry season sets, with the famous Meru National Park seeing 12 of its 14 permanent rivers dry up. In a special report, Rivers of Thirst, our reporter Dan Kaburu scaled the heights of Mount Kenya, the source of many rivers, and traced their journey downstream, showing the destruction that has taken place due to human activity. Here's a report.
We start our journey at the foot of Mount Kenya in Njoroge. Our journey takes us up the mountain as we pierce through the thick fog, determined to locate the source of the rivers in the region. I am at more than 3,000 meters above sea level on Mount Kenya, the source of many rivers serving Tharaka Nithi County and beyond. Our guide Stella Njoroge has been climbing the mountain for the last 20 years and is quite familiar with the changes in this mountain.
We don't have the main, the permanent snows that we had in Mount Kenya 15 years ago. This section of the forest is fast regenerating after fire consumed thousands of acres of the moorland in February 2019. Moorland plays a critical role in the collection of water during rain season and acts as a natural reservoir which keeps the rivers flowing, especially during the dry seasons. Descending the mountain at about 6,000 feet above sea level, we penetrate deep into this thick forest and came across River Mara, a key river that serves Tharaka Nithi County. The volume of water in this river is good, though it has experienced a slight drop in water levels, according to our guide. But as you get to the edge of Mount Kenya forest, communities have encroached the area. The river bend that was part of the river is now an arrowroot farm, an indication of a declining river.
Ile kitu ingehitajika hapa ni walma washughulike, wajue mtu aliapply maji kiasi gani na amechukua gani. Ile inabaki irudi kwa mto ifikie wale wako chini.
Going down to Ishiara in Embu County, we find the famous river Dhochi. Water level in the river have gone down drastically thanks to over-obstruction. 4 major water intakes are found here, all of them in a distance of 1 kilometer. A reality we are informed is against the law as it amounts to obstruction.
Zimejengwa karibu na vile sheria inasema zile ambazo ziko karibu sana, intake ile inaweza kuwa karibu sana ni kilomita 4 kutoka kwa ile ingine.
People have chosen to ignore the law and do what they want. My word to them is that there is no one who is above the law.
Water Resource Authority is supposed to give you the quantities and regulate the quantities of water that you are allowed to obstruct. Unfortunately, there is no such regulation being done, so you have people fixing pipes as big 12 inches, 17-inch pipes.
Further downstream, it is totally dried up, leaving residents with no option but to search for water long distances away.
Tunatumia masaa kama 3 kwenda huko na kurudi. Hiyo maji yetu ya mto imekauka kabisa, hata kupika ni shida.
Huko ngambo huyo mama anasema zinavuka kukuja huku na zingine zetu tunaenda huko. Huku yenyewe sio mbuzi, kuku wanavuka kwa sababu hakuna maji.
Dosi imekauka kiwango ya kwamba nyoka hawezi pata maji kwa mto, wanaenda kwa manyumba ya watu kutafuta maji. Kila mnyama unajua anategea maji.
From there we move to River Dhingi in Tharaka constituency. It is a rocky situation here. Years back, it was not possible to stand here during the dry season, but now the sound of the river has been silenced by human activity. This is what remains of a massive waterfall in the river that serves thousands of people from Meru and Tharaka-Nithi counties. The hope that residents have here is the water gushing forth from this rock at the banks of the dead river.
Unakuja hapa kutoka asubuhi mpaka jioni, hata wakati mwingine wakati wanatoka hapa saa 3 usiku, sababu ya vile wanang'ang'ania ile maji kidogo inatoka.
Hii ni ya kuenda kupeleka nyumbani, ya kuosha nguo, ya kunywa maji. Sasa nitaenda kutafuta kwingine.
Mutambo is coming down to Tharaka-Nithi, and the people of Tharaka-Nithi who are living downstream, they will get water.
Some have traveled more than 30 kilometers to access this precious commodity.
Niko na wiki bila kuoga. Nitaoga na nini na hakuna maji?
Our efforts to speak to top leaders from Tharaka-Nithi County bore no fruit, with the locals accusing them of being behind the water obstruction claims. We proceed to Meru National Park that is home to the Big Five. Our mission is to find out the state of the rivers here. The situation is not different from that of Tharaka-Nithi County. 12 out of 14 rivers that once watered the park have dried up, leaving wildlife with only 2 rivers whose waters are quickly receding.
The community neighboring the park, especially on the western boundary, have a lot to do with what we are facing as a harsh reality, that most of the rivers are no longer flowing into the park.
The management of the park was forced to share water from River Mulika, whose source is inside the park, with River Boderongi in order to distribute it and cover a wider range to save the wildlife. Downstream of River Boderongi, this dam is now the hope for these hippos and crocodiles.
Our wildlife behaves within the park to an extent. As we speak, the last 2-3 days we've had rampaging elephants moving into Kadidi or Kadidene within Ura, Kismani, as well as Dangada outside the park. And for the simple reason, the elephant is looking for water.
Kakungu swamp that is few meters from the park has been turned into a grazing zone, with farming having taken center stage. Generators are being used to pump water from the swamp for irrigation. The resort is drying up this river that is supposed to be a lifeline for wildlife in Meru National Park and beyond. Murera town at the entrance of the park is thirsty, a dry place that has not seen water for a long time, a clear indication of how tough things have become here. This borehole that uses solar power is almost dry, and residents can only get water when the sun shines.
Ile tulipatia kura hakuna hata moja na kanyanga kwetu haone sisi. Sasa ni sisi takaa kama manuku ya mistuni. Aya huko park ndio anasaidia sisi hata na maji. Saa 5 usiku tunaenda kuchota maji. Nyati iko mbele.
Pia Uhuru atusaidie. Sisi tunateseka na maji, tukinapiga kiraito kura, yeye anakuja anatuambia ati nitawaletea maji. Tunampigia kura ya nini?
The park shares the little water it has with a few locals who queue here from 6 p.m. to get the precious commodity. For now, residents of this place and wildlife at the Meru National Park will continue to suffer until help comes their way. Dan Kaburu, K24 at Meru National Park in Meru County.
That's Dan Kaburu.
Yeah.
You know, and I love the courage of George Mutethia, that young boy there who says alipigia kiraito kura. Na kuna kitu amefanya so far. But we're joined live by Kaburu, Dan Kaburu, the reporter who did that particular story. He is in Suswa en route to Mau Forest, and we now bring him live to just get a feel of exactly what inspired him to go after this story and what he was able to find out on the ground. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Rivers of Thirst, why this particular piece?
Thank you, Njoroge and Shiksha. Now, One thing many people are actually surprised to note is that it's not normal for Mount Kenya region to lack water. But when this story came up, when we were down there shooting the story, when I was speaking to people, even within the newsroom, they were like, it is not possible for the Mount Kenya region to lack water. But that's the sad reality, because as we speak, about 7 rivers traversing Tharaka Nithi County have already dried up, and the situation is getting from bad to worse each and every day. People traveling hundreds of kilometers, others 30 kilometers and more to look for water. But now, even moving over to the national park, like I mentioned the story, out of 14 rivers, 12 are gone. And the situation is still getting from bad to worse. We've seen human-wildlife conflict increasing each and every day in that region. And actually, from the words of the senior warden in Meru National Park, is that this situation will get worse because each and every day the waters in the rivers are receding. And we got to understand in Njoroge that the problem is of obstruction of water upstream by people who want to, some of them for their own use, others a community community water intake. And these intakes are so close to each other that even the water that is left in the river cannot go beyond 5 kilometers downstream. Now those living downstream are not forced to move from any corner they can get even clean water to drink. Now, another issue we came across in Njoroge is that from where you've seen us on the mountain, there's a swamp in that mountain, whereby we are told there's a plan to construct a dam inside the forest in this wetland. And this is a very sad situation, because if that takes place, I can assure you more rivers will keep on drying up, because there's no seriousness in the whole issue. Another thing we found out is that in these intakes where they have been put, there are regulations which are supposed to be followed when someone is licensed to abstract water. But many of them, no one follows back to see whether what was licensed is what they are actually abstracting with. So many are left to use any types of pipes they want, because no one is following up them. And this is all blame, the blame now lies on Water Resource Authority, because people downstream can easily tell, even the youngest child can tell you on the ground, that people upstream are denying them water, and this could cause a crisis if it's not checked on time in Njoroge.
Right, Dan, thank you so much for that response. But we saw you also engage Cabinet Secretary Keriako Tobiko, and he says there is lack of proper legislation and policy to govern this issue. So anyone would ask, where is this policy supposed to come from, if not from the ministry itself?
Okay, there is, from the CS, there was a meeting between him and the Minister of Water, because both ministries are intertwined when it comes to matters of environment, especially when water is involved. But according to him, the Ministry of Water has a bigger role when it comes to regulation, because the water resources falls under the ministry. Now, the Ministry of Environment is involved in making sure that the forests are well protected, and so that the rivers can keep on flowing, the wetland can keep on flowing. But also we've seen encroachment in these wetlands, like you've seen outside the Meru National Park. So according to him, there's need for more interrelation or co-working between the two ministries to make sure that this issue is addressed, because it is getting out of hand, and nothing much is happening on the ground in Njoroge.
All right, Dan, of course, you know, the Mau eviction is currently looming, and we've seen that this step is obviously to restore the ecosystem and to get the whole human-wildlife conflict out of the system, and especially when it comes to water catchment areas in the Mau. One of the reasons that we've seen behind this eviction process is to restore the rivers. Now, do you think that by doing this will actually be a step in the right direction?
Where we're going, the eviction to me is a good direction to take, because we must protect the Mara ecosystem. Remember, Mara ecosystem is a very key ecosystem in for the entire country, because that's where we have the Mara National Reserve. Now, conserving Mau Forest Shiksha is very key, because allowing all type of activities to go on, we are now following what you've seen in Meru and other areas of Mount Kenya East. So if nothing is done also in Mau, of course, as we speak, the Mara River has receded drastically, and even actually the seventh wonder of the world, which is the wildebeest migration, this year was not as attractive because the wildebeest can easily cross the river. There's no crocodiles. It's normally the case. The crocodiles, you find them at the banks of the river. So this is, in essence, what we are saying is that Mara ecosystem is very key. So conserving this Mau forest, according to me, is a very critical issue. But of course, the government has to do it in a way that no one is affected along the way. But at the end of the day, we conserve this environment because the next generation relies on this generation for the sake of a cleaner and better environment, Shiksha.
Well, Dan, revisiting your feature, we saw the chair of the Water Regulatory Authority, that is Joe Mutambu, tell you that he will be going after the people who can be blamed for this mess. What can we expect him to do? What can we expect the authority to do?
When I spoke to him, he gave me an example. If you remember the story we heard about the Chania River some time back, and he was referring to that story, and he told me what we did in Chania River is exactly what you're going to do in Mount Kenya East, where rivers have been, water obstruction is ongoing. But of course, until he does something about it, because we understand from the ground, Njoroge, is that it's so sad that no leader from Meru County and the Rakanidi counties agreed to speak to us concerning the same. And what the residents were telling us is that many of them are involved actually in the obstruction of water. That is the reason why they could not want to talk about it. But the words of Joe Mutambu, when we spoke to him, he said that no one is above the law. So we are waiting to see whether that happens, because as he talks about no one is above the law, people are still suffering. Thousands of people. Actually, in Njoroge, there are many areas that we'd not be able to cover are the most affected, because where we were, when you go down from where we were, the situation is extremely bad. And so I don't know when to expect Mutambu in Meru and the Rakanidi counties to be able to help people downstream get water. That is, remains with him. He will tell us maybe when he's on the ground we can look at it. But as it is, people are still suffering, and the situation is so critical that something must be done, and done now. Njoroge.
Thank you so much, Dan Kaburu, for that. Of course, he's en route to the Mau today. And of course, we'll keep liaising with him in the course of this show. And if not, during our subsequent bulletins, remember the issue with the Mau bears or revolves around three issues. The environmental issue, the issue of whether or not Mau is a trust land. There are some politicians who are contesting it. And also, courtesy of the briefing that George Natembeya, the regional coordinator, Rift Valley, had with President Uhuru Kenyatta, there is the entire issue of humanity, and these evictions being conducted in a manner that actually preserves the dignity of those who've been living there. So we shall be looking into all these issues in the course of this show or during our subsequent bulletins. But for now, it's time for a break.